split everything equally among my 3 children. The lawyer's voice echoed in the silent room as he read my mother's final words. My hands trembled in my lap, fingers interlaced so tightly my knuckles had turned white. 5 years. I'd spent 5 years caring for Mom in that house, bathing her when she couldn't stand, feeding her when her hands shook too much to hold a spoon, sitting beside her hospital bed through endless nights when the pain was too much for her to sleep. Across from me, my brother Tyler grinned like he'd just won the lottery. My sister Amber actually laughed, a small, victorious sound that made my stomach turn. They'd visited maybe twice a year. Birthday phone calls. Christmas cards with generic messages. But now, hearing that the house was worth nearly $400,000, suddenly they were invested family members. The primary asset is the family home at 847 Maple Drive, the lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses. Current market value estimated at $1.2 million. Tyler sat forward. Amber pulled out her phone, probably already calculating her share. And I sat there, realizing that the home where I'd sacrificed everything, my career, my relationships, my entire life, was about to be taken from me by people who couldn't even remember Mom's favorite flower. The next morning, I woke up in what had been my bedroom for 5 years. Mom's house. My home. Sunlight filtered through the curtains I'd hung 2 years ago when Mom said the old ones made the room feel too dark. I could still hear her voice, "You've always had such good taste, sweetheart." I was making coffee in the kitchen, Mom's kitchen, where I'd prepared countless meals adjusted for her dietary restrictions, when Tyler and Amber walked in without knocking. They'd kept their keys, apparently. "We need to talk," Tyler announced, settling into a chair like he owned the place. Which, legally, he partly did now. Amber crossed her arms. "We want to sell. As soon as possible. The market's good right now, and we could get $400,000 each, maybe more." My hand shook, coffee splashing onto the counter. "This is my home. I've lived here for 5 years taking care of Mom. And we appreciate that," Tyler said in a tone that suggested he appreciated nothing. "But the will says equal shares. We need our money." "It's not just money," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It's Mom. Her memories. Her house," Amber interrupted. "Which is now our inheritance. We all get the same. That's what equal means." They didn't care. I could see it in their eyes. 5 years of sacrifice meant nothing against the promise of a 6-figure payout. That evening, I heard them in the living room. I'd gone upstairs to Mom's room. I couldn't bring myself to change anything in there yet, when their voices drifted up through the old house's thin walls. "The lawyer said we can force a sale if one party refuses," Tyler was saying. "It's called a partition action." "How long does that take?" Amber asked. "Few months, maybe. But if we all agree, we could list it next week." "What about," Amber's voice dropped, but I could still hear her. "What about making it clear this isn't optional? Claire needs to understand this is happening whether she likes it or not." My chest burned. I pressed my back against Mom's bedroom door, sliding down to sit on the floor. These were the same people who'd sent excuses for why they couldn't visit when Mom was dying. Work obligations. Prior commitments. But now they were strategizing how to evict me from the place where I'd cared for her until her last breath. I looked around Mom's room, her reading glasses still on the nightstand, her favorite blanket folded at the foot of the bed, the photo of all 3 of us from 20 years ago when we'd actually been a family. The people downstairs plotting my removal weren't the siblings in that photo anymore. I spent that night in Mom's room, something I'd avoided doing since she passed 3 months ago. Her scent still clung faintly to the pillow, lavender from her favorite lotion mixed with the smell of the vanilla candle she'd loved. I buried my face in it and cried harder than I had since the funeral. "You'll always have this home," she'd told me 2 weeks before she died. Her hand had been so frail in mine, her voice weak but certain. "No matter what happens, this is your home, Claire. You've earned it 1,000 times over." I believed her. foolishly, completely believed that somehow her final wishes would protect me. That there was an unspoken understanding that the child who stayed, who sacrificed, who gave up everything, that child would be taken care of. But Mom's actual will said nothing about my sacrifice. Nothing about the 5 years I'd put my life on hold. Nothing about the career I'd abandoned or the relationship that had fallen apart because I couldn't leave Mom when she needed me. It just said equal. As if we'd all contributed equally. As if showing up twice a year was the same as being there every single day. I fell asleep clutching Mom's pillow, dreaming of a version of my siblings who would have cared enough to see what was fair versus what was equal. The legal letter arrived 4 days later. Certified mail, requiring my signature. My hands shook as I opened the thick envelope. Dear Ms. Claire Anderson, we represent Tyler Anderson and Amber Morrison regarding the estate of Patricia Anderson. Our clients request immediate sale of the property located at 847 Maple Drive. If you do not agree to list the property within 30 days, we will file a partition action to force the sale. This is not a matter of preference but of legal right. Please contact our office to arrange the sale process. I read it 3 times, each pass making my stomach sink deeper. They'd hired a lawyer. My own siblings had hired a lawyer to force me out of my home. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I just sat in the living room where Mom used to watch her favorite shows, where I'd held her hand during her worst days, where she'd told me stories about her childhood and made me promise to always remember where I came from. This room, this house, it wasn't just real estate. It was 5 years of my life. It was every moment I'd chosen Mom over everything else. It was the place where I'd learned what real love looked like when you stripped away everything convenient about it. And my siblings saw it as nothing more than a bank account waiting to be liquidated. For the first time, I understood what people meant when they said blood means nothing when money is involved. The meeting at the lawyer's office was worse than I'd imagined. I sat across from Tyler and Amber in uncomfortable chairs, their attorney beside them looking professionally bored. Claire, Tyler started, his tone suggesting he was being patient with a difficult child. We need to move forward. The house has to be sold. My voice came out stronger than I felt. Do you have any idea what I gave up? 5 years. I gave up 5 years of my life. I lost my job. My relationship ended. I have nothing except that house and the memories of taking care of Mom while you two couldn't even bother to visit. Amber's expression hardened. We had our own lives. Our own responsibilities. And I didn't? My voice cracked. Do you think I wanted to quit my career? To watch my friends move on without me? To spend every holiday in a hospital or managing medications? Tyler leaned forward. Mom wanted equal, not fair. Those were her words in the will. Equal shares for all 3 children. We didn't write the will, Claire. She did. The words hit me like a physical slap. Mom wanted equal, not fair. As if fairness had never mattered. As if my 5 years of sacrifice should count the same as their 5 phone calls a year. Fine, I whispered, defeated. Sell the house. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday morning. I watched from the window as the real estate agent hammered it into the front lawn, the lawn I'd mowed every week, the garden I'd maintained because Mom loved watching the flowers bloom. Strangers started touring within days. I had to pack Mom's things into boxes while people walked through rooms that still smelled like her, pointing at walls and discussing renovation plans. One couple actually laughed about the old person smell they'd need to get rid of. I wanted to scream at them. To tell them that smell was my mother's life, her presence, the last traces of a woman who'd raised 3 children and deserved better than to be reduced to an inconvenience for house flippers. Instead, I packed her photo albums into boxes. Her collection of teacups. The quilt she'd made by hand. Every item felt like I was erasing her, preparing her home to become someone else's investment property. Tyler and Amber never came to help. They were too busy, they said. Tyler had work commitments. Amber had her kids' activities. Neither of them had time to help pack away the mother who'd given them everything. So I did it alone, just like I'd done everything else for the past 5 years. The closing date arrived exactly 6 weeks after the sign went up. The market was hot, and we'd gotten multiple offers over asking price. Tyler and Amber were thrilled. I was numb. I stood on the front porch for the last time, key in hand. The new owners were nice enough, a young couple with a baby on the way, excited about their first home. They didn't know this house's history. Didn't know about the woman who'd died here 3 months ago, or the daughter who'd given up everything to care for her. To them, it was just a house. A good investment in a nice neighborhood. I turned the key in the lock one final time, hearing the familiar click that I'd heard thousands of times over 5 years. I hope you're proud, Mom, I whispered to the empty air. I hope this is what you really wanted. A single tear hit the wooden doorstep, leaving a dark spot that would dry and disappear within minutes. Then I walked away from the house where I'd lived my entire adult life, where I'd learned what sacrifice really meant, where I'd said goodbye to my mother. Behind me, Tyler and Amber were already discussing how to invest their share. Neither one looked back at the house. Neither one seemed to feel what we were losing. The final payout came 3 weeks later. After real estate commissions, lawyer fees, taxes, and closing costs, we each received $300,000. Not the $400,000 we'd projected. The market had cooled slightly, and the expenses had been higher than expected. I stared at the check, feeling nothing. $300,000 for 5 years of my life. For my mother's home. For everything I'd sacrificed. Tyler called me that evening, angry. You dragged this process out. If we'd sold immediately like we wanted, we would have gotten more. You cost us money. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. I cost you money? You made me lose my home and $100,000 each because you couldn't wait a few months. That's not how it works, Amber chimed in. She was on the call too, apparently. The will said equal shares. We all get the same. The irony was suffocating. They'd forced me out of my home, blamed me for the reduced payout, and still couldn't see their own cruelty. Money had revealed who they really were, and I didn't recognize these people as my siblings anymore. I hung up without saying goodbye. What was there left to say? The silence started gradually, then became absolute. Tyler stopped responding to my texts. Amber blocked me on social media. Group chats that had once coordinated family gatherings went quiet, then eventually dissolved. Thanksgiving passed. I spent it alone in my small rented apartment, a significant downgrade from the house I'd lost. Christmas came and went without a single message from either of them. My birthday, which Mom had always made special, arrived and departed unmarked. Our family had dissolved like sugar in boiling water, quick, complete, irreversible. I started wondering if the money had been worth it. $300,000 in exchange for 2 siblings, a lifetime of family memories, and any hope of reconciliation. For them, apparently, it had been a fair trade. For me, I'd lost everything that mattered and gained a bank account that couldn't fill the emptiness. I missed Mom more than ever. She would have been heartbroken to see what had become of her children. Or maybe she would have expected it. Maybe that's why she'd written the will the way she did, knowing exactly what would happen, but too tired or too sick to fight it. Over coffee one afternoon, my best friend Tessa listened to the whole story. When I finished, she set down her cup and sighed deeply. Parents think dividing things equally is fair when there's nothing fair about it, she said. My aunt went through the same thing. She cared for her mother for 8 years. When her mother died, the will split everything equally among 4 children. The 3 who'd done nothing got the same as the one who'd sacrificed everything. What happened? I asked. They haven't spoken in 12 years. The money's long gone, but the resentment isn't. Tessa reached across the table, squeezing my hand. The child who sacrifices the most often gets punished for it. Because everyone else sees the inheritance as free money, but you see it as inadequate compensation for years of your life. she was right. Tyler and Amber saw $300,000 as a windfall. I saw it as a fraction of what I'd lost, my career trajectory, my relationship, 5 years I could never get back, and the home where I'd planned to build my future. The worst part, I whispered, is that I'd do it all again. Taking care of Mom was the right thing to do. But I wish she'd protected me from this. From them. One sleepless night, I went through old emails looking for anything, photos, messages, some connection to the family we used to be. That's when I found it. A draft email from Mom's account, dated 8 months before she died. The subject line read, "Updated wishes for the house." My heart raced as I opened it. The email was addressed to her lawyer but had never been sent. "Mr. Phillips, I've been thinking about my will. Claire has sacrificed so much to care for me. She's given up her career, her personal life, everything. I want to update the document to ensure she can keep the house until she's ready to sell, with the proceeds split equally then. Or perhaps give her first right of refusal to buy out her siblings' shares. She's earned this home 1,000 times over. Please call me next week to discuss the changes." The email had been saved as a draft. Never sent. Never acted upon. I checked the date again. 8 months before Mom died. She'd meant to change the will. She'd recognized what I'd given up and wanted to protect me. But the update never happened. And suddenly I needed to know why. I called Mr. Phillips, Mom's lawyer, the next morning. My voice shook as I asked about the unsent email. "Oh, yes," he said, sympathy clear in his tone. "Your mother did mention wanting to update the will. I urged her to come in for an appointment. I believe we scheduled at 4, let me check my records, yes, March 15th. But she never came in. Why not? I'm not entirely certain. I called to confirm the day before, and someone answered saying your mother wasn't feeling well enough to travel. They said they'd reschedule but never did." Someone. Who answered the phone? I believe it was your sister. Yes, Amber picked up when I called the house. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk to steady myself. Amber was there that day? Yes, she'd apparently come to visit. She said she'd relay the message about rescheduling, but I never heard back. Then your mother's health declined rapidly, and... He trailed off. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Amber had been at the house. She'd taken the lawyer's call. She'd promised to reschedule and never did. Had it been innocent forgetfulness? Or had she realized that an updated will would mean less money for her and Tyler? I wanted to believe it was an accident. But the timing was too convenient. And Amber had never mentioned being there that day, never mentioned the lawyer's call, never suggested that Mom had wanted to change anything. I confronted Amber 3 days later. She agreed to meet at a coffee shop, probably expecting me to beg for a relationship reconciliation. Instead, I asked directly, "Did you prevent Mom from updating her will?" Her face went pale, then flushed red. "What? That's insane. Why would I?" "The lawyer said you were at the house when he called to confirm her appointment. The appointment to change the will to give me the house. You told him she couldn't make it and said you'd reschedule. But you never did." Amber's hands trembled around her coffee cup. She'd changed her mind. She told me she didn't want to play favorites, that she wanted everything to be equal. I was protecting her wishes. Protecting her wishes, or protecting your inheritance? My voice was cold, steady. Months of grief and rage had crystallized into something hard and unbreakable. Tyler, who'd arrived late, caught the end of the conversation. He looked between us, then down at his phone. Guilty. He'd known. Or at least suspected. Mom wanted to update the will, I said, looking at both of them. She wanted to make sure I had the house after giving up 5 years of my life. But somehow that appointment never happened, and now we'll never know what she really wanted. Amber stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. The will says what it says. You're just looking for someone to blame because you're broke and alone. She stormed out. Tyler followed without meeting my eyes. And I sat there, knowing the truth even if I couldn't prove it. My siblings had stolen more than my inheritance. They'd stolen Mom's final wishes. 6 months after we'd sold the house, I was scrolling through real estate listings when I saw it. 847 Maple Drive. Back on the market. The young couple who'd bought it were selling. Their description explained why, unexpected job relocation, needed to sell quickly. The asking price was $1.5 million. I read it 3 times, unable to process the numbers. We'd sold for $1.2 million. In 6 months, the value had increased by $300,000. If we'd each kept our shares and held on to the house for just half a year longer, we'd each have made an additional $100,000. But more than that, if Mom's original plan had happened, if I'd been able to keep the house until I was ready, I'd now be sitting on a property worth $1.5 million. I could have bought out my siblings eventually, or waited until the market peaked. Instead, I'd been forced to sell at the worst possible time. Tyler and Amber had pressured me into a sale that had cost all of us money, but especially me, since I'd lost both my home and the potential appreciation. The realization crushed me. We'd lost everything, not just emotionally, but financially too. Their greed had made them stupid, and I'd been too grief-stricken to fight back effectively. That night, I broke down in my car outside the office building where I worked. I'd taken a job as an administrative assistant, a massive step down from my previous career in marketing management, but I'd been out of the field for 5 years. I was starting over at 35 with a resume gap that screamed unemployable. I gripped the steering wheel and sobbed, not caring who might see. I'd traded everything for loyalty. Loyalty to Mom, loyalty to the promise that family mattered. And loyalty had left me alone, broke and broken. Something inside me died that day. The part that believed sacrifice would be rewarded. The part that thought family meant something beyond shared DNA. The part that wanted to forgive and move forward. But something new was born too. Something harder, sharper, more determined. I'd lost the battle for the house. I'd lost my siblings. I'd lost the life I was supposed to have. But I wouldn't lose my mother's legacy. I wouldn't let Tyler and Amber turn her memory into nothing more than a payout they'd already spent and forgotten. If they wouldn't honor who she was, I would. And I'd make sure they knew exactly what they'd thrown away. I drafted a letter to Tyler and Amber that night. Raw, honest, devastating. You didn't just take money. You took our memories. You took Mom's legacy and turned it into profit. You stole her final wishes and convinced yourselves it was legal instead of moral. You chose greed over family and will spend the rest of your lives knowing you destroyed something irreplaceable for $300,000 you've probably already spent. I hope it was worth it. I hope every time you think of Mom, you remember that you evicted her daughter from her home while her ashes were barely cold. I hope you never sleep soundly again. I read it 5 times. Revised it. Made it sharper, more cutting. Then I deleted the entire thing. Revenge through words wouldn't satisfy me. They'd dismiss it, block my email, tell themselves I was bitter and jealous. Words they could ignore. But actions? Actions they'd have to see. Actions that would force them to confront what they'd done and who they'd become. I needed to build something Mom would have been proud of. Something that would immortalize her better than any house or bank account ever could. And I needed Tyler and Amber to watch me do it, knowing they'd had their chance to be part of something meaningful and had chosen cash instead. The idea came to me during a sleepless night, staring at the ceiling of my tiny rental apartment. Mom had always said her greatest joy was helping people. She'd volunteered at nursing homes before she got sick. She'd donated to caregiving organizations. She'd believed that supporting those who cared for the vulnerable was sacred work. I could create a foundation in her name. A caregiving scholarship or grant program for people who'd sacrificed their careers to care for family members. People like me, who'd given up everything and had nothing to show for it. It would require most of my inheritance money. Maybe all of it. But it would be permanent. Meaningful. Everything Mom had actually valued, as opposed to the property value my siblings had obsessed over. And critically, it would be public. Visible. Something Tyler and Amber couldn't ignore or dismiss. Every time someone Googled Mom's name, they'd see the foundation. Every time they bragged about their inheritance, someone could mention what I'd done with mine. It wouldn't bring Mom back. Wouldn't repair my relationship with my siblings. Wouldn't give me those 5 years of my life back. But it would prove that I'd understood what Mom really cared about. And it would haunt Tyler and Amber forever. I wrote the story first. Not the letter I deleted, but a public narrative. I changed names and some details, but the core was undeniable. A daughter who'd sacrificed 5 years to care for her dying mother. Siblings who'd swooped in after the death to claim equal shares of an inheritance they hadn't earned. A will that said equal but meant unfair. A family destroyed by greed. I posted it on a caregiving support forum, then a few websites that shared family conflict stories. No names. No identifying details. Just the raw truth of what had happened. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments within the first day. Thousands by the end of the week. This happened to me too. I cared for my father for 7 years and got nothing. My siblings did the exact same thing. I'm so sorry you went through this. Equal isn't fair when contributions aren't equal. This breaks my heart. The story was shared across platforms. Reddit threads analyzed it. TikTok videos discussed it. Facebook posts referenced it. Within 2 weeks, it had gone viral in caregiving communities, with over 1 million views. And I knew Tyler and Amber had seen it. Their friends would have sent it to them. People would have asked if it sounded familiar. They'd know. And they'd hate that everyone was judging them without even knowing their names. Tyler called first. His voice was tight, angry, defensive. Was that story about us? I kept my tone calm, almost pleasant. If the shoe fits. You made us look like villains. We didn't do anything wrong. The will. The will that Mom wanted to change but never got the chance because Amber prevented the appointment? That will? Silence. You know the truth, Tyler. You know what you two did. The whole world doesn't need to know your names to understand who you are. I paused, letting the words sink in. But you'll know. Every time someone shares that story, you'll remember what you chose. And you'll know that everyone reading it is judging people exactly like you. Claire, I hung up before he could finish. For the first time since Mom died, I felt powerful instead of powerless. They couldn't threaten me with lawyers or forced sales. Couldn't take anything else from me because I had nothing left to take. But I had something they couldn't touch, the truth. And the truth was viral, permanent, and damning. We met again at a distant relative's funeral 6 months later. Unavoidable. We were family, technically, and old Aunt Helen had been important to all of us once. Amber avoided my eyes throughout the entire service. Tyler mumbled a weak greeting but couldn't maintain eye contact. During the reception, he approached me hesitantly. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For how everything happened. For not seeing what you'd given up. For being so focused on the money that I forgot what actually mattered. I nodded slowly. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Thank you for saying that. Can we ever? He trailed off, unable to finish. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But right now, I can't be around people who hurt me and thought they were entitled to do it. The foundation launches next month. You're welcome to attend if you want. He looked surprised. Foundation? In Mom's name. For caregiving support. I'll send you the details. I walked away before he could respond, feeling the weight of our broken relationship but no longer crushed by it. Amber left without speaking to me at all. Some wounds were too deep for simple apologies. I found out through mutual friends. Tyler had invested most of his inheritance in a tech startup his friend was launching. The company folded within 8 months. He'd lost nearly everything, almost $200,000 gone. Amber's marriage had fallen apart. The money she'd fought so hard for had gone into paying divorce lawyers and splitting assets with her ex-husband. She'd walked away with less than $50,000 remaining from her inheritance. Neither of them had what they'd wanted. The money they'd destroyed our family for had slipped through their fingers within a year, leaving them with nothing but debt, broken relationships, and the memory of what they'd done. I should have felt satisfied. Vindicated. Like karma had delivered the justice I couldn't. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad that we'd all lost so much. Sad that Mom's death had revealed such ugly truths about people I'd once loved. Sad that $300,000, money that should have been a blessing, had become a curse that poisoned everything it touched. They'd gotten what they thought they wanted. And it had destroyed them just as thoroughly as their actions had destroyed me. But at least I'd built something from my destruction. They'd just wasted it. A year after we'd sold the house, I visited 847 Maple Drive one last time. The family who'd bought it from the young couple let me in when I explained who I was. "Your mother's home?" the woman said kindly. "Of course. Take all the time you need." They'd painted the walls different colors. Changed the flooring. Renovated the kitchen. But somehow, I could still feel Mom's presence. The afternoon light through the living room window fell in the same pattern. The stairs still creaked on the 3rd step. The view from her bedroom window was unchanged. I stood in that room for a long time, memories washing over me. Mom laughing at something on television. Mom teaching me to cook in the kitchen. Mom holding my hand during her worst pain and thanking me for staying. "I finally understand fairness, Mom," I whispered to the empty air. "It's not about equal shares. It's not about money or property or legal documents. It's about equal hearts. Equal care. Equal love." Tyler and Amber had gotten equal money. But they'd never had equal hearts. They'd never loved Mom or me or each other the way family should love. The will had divided the money equally, but it couldn't divide something that had never been equal to begin with. "Thank you for teaching me what really matters," I said quietly. "I wish you'd protected me better. But I understand now why you couldn't. You believed in equality because you wanted to believe your children were equals. You didn't want to see the truth." The foundation launched on what would have been Mom's 75th birthday. We held a small ceremony at a local community center, nothing fancy, but meaningful. I'd used $200,000 of my inheritance to establish the Patricia Anderson Caregiving Foundation. It would provide scholarships for young people who'd interrupted their educations to care for family members. Grants for caregivers who needed financial support. Resources for people navigating the same impossible choices I'd faced. The media called it a daughter's silent revenge. That phrase appeared in 3 different articles. Tyler called it bitter. Amber said it was making a spectacle of family business. But I didn't care what they called it. 120 people attended the launch. Caregivers who'd heard my story and felt seen for the first time. Social workers who'd been advocating for this kind of support for years. Healthcare professionals who understood how often family caregivers were exploited and abandoned. I stood at the podium, looking out at faces that understood sacrifice. This foundation exists because my mother taught me that caring for others is the highest calling. She taught me that love is measured not in money or property, but in presence. In showing up. In staying when everyone else leaves. The applause was genuine, warm. These people understood. They'd lived versions of my story. And now they had resources that might make their journeys slightly easier. This was Mom's real legacy. Not a house. Not a bank account. But the value she'd placed on caring for the vulnerable. 2 years after Mom died, I stood at another podium. The foundation had grown beyond my wildest hopes. We'd helped 37 caregivers return to school. Provided grants to 53 families struggling with the costs of home care. Created support groups in 6 cities. People often ask if I regret how things turned out. I told the audience of donors and supporters. They want to know if I'm angry about losing my mother's house. About my siblings. About the 5 years I spent caring instead of advancing my career. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I don't regret caring for my mother. Those 5 years were the most meaningful of my life. But I do regret believing that sacrifice would be rewarded by the people who never understood its value. The room was silent, listening. My story went viral not because it's unique, but because it's universal. Thousands of you have lived versions of this story. And thousands more will face these choices in the future. I gestured to the foundation's banner behind me. We can't change what happened to us. But we can change what happens next. We can build systems that support caregivers instead of exploiting them. We can honor the people who choose love over convenience. Later, as I packed up materials from the event, I checked my phone. Tyler had sent a message, "Watched your speech online. Mom would be proud. I'm sorry I wasn't better when it mattered." I read it twice, then put my phone away without responding. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something. Maybe not. But I'd stopped waiting for my siblings to validate my choices or acknowledge my sacrifice. I didn't need a house to prove my worth. I'd built something they could never buy, a legacy that would outlive all of us. Tyler and Amber had sold Mom's home and spent their inheritance. I'd transformed mine into something permanent, meaningful, and true to who Mom had really been. That was my quiet victory. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just the knowledge that I'd understood what actually mattered, and I'd built a future Mom would have loved. The foundation had helped over 100 caregivers. That number would grow every year. Long after the money was spent, long after we were all gone, Mom's name would be associated with compassion and support for people who'd chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. Tyler and Amber got $300,000. I got to continue Mom's real work. In the end, I'd won something they never could, peace.